So in this session, I'm going to cut it short so that we leave more time for you to raise your concern or questions later on. So I'm going to focus on clinical trials, okay? So there are two parts. The number one thing is, the first part, I'm going to give you sort of an overview of some of the clinical trials which is currently ongoing in the region. And then the second part, I'm going to talk about how, as a patient advocate, you can actually help us, not only in conducting, but in also in planning, and in sort of determining clinical trials. So I think nowadays, clinical trials have become more and more important in our clinical practice because it helps to make the progress in not only in treatment, but also prevention and care of people with cancer. Okay? And this knowledge could not have been gained without the participation of the patients and yourself as a patient advocate and also us as healthcare professionals. And over the years, we have been seeing that there are more and more clinical trials being conducted in the Asia-Pacific region. Now, many of these are actually the international multi-center study. Now, we have seen that maybe 20 years ago, most of the multi-center trials are being done in US, in Europe. Now there are a lot of trials actually coming to Asia, okay, including Asia as part of the study, because they know that Asia is a huge market. Because our population is bigger than US, we are bigger than Europe. If they don't come here, they're going to lose quite a big deal of money. But on the other side, we are also seeing that a number of doctors, okay, or academics in the region are writing up their own research protocol, their proposal, and try to get support either from the government or even from the drug companies to support the local studies. Okay? These are the local studies designed to address the need of the people in that particular country. Okay? And also, we have now also seen some more regional collaborative study. So we have seen some study which is actually a multi-center, multi-country studies, but is actually mainly focused on Asia-Pacific region. Okay, so we have studied in collaboration with China, Taiwan, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, etc. Because we know that our sort of population and our problems are unique. Okay, we don't see like today we've seen that Australia is like an ideal world. It's like a Western country, got everything. We got nothing, so we have to fight for resources. Okay, so we now understand that maybe if we start doing things as a clinical trial, that will help to move forward because the local clinical trial can help us to gain some experience and also some data so that we can present to the government. You see, this is what we have done. Okay? Now, there's some study being done in US. You think we are different. Now we have our own data, our own study, establishing the fact that this can benefit our patient. Please give us the money to make it real, in real life practice. So what I have done is that I know there are a number of clinical trials undergoing in this part of the world. So what I have done is that I go to the clinicaltrial.gov, which is now a website with a database that all the investigators can actually register their clinical trial in that database. Okay? Now, of course, I understand that there are some clinical trials not being registered, but I think this is a good source so that I try to use it to take a snapshot to help you to understand what's ongoing in the region. So I actually have done a search of all the studies which are currently active, recruiting patients, okay, in the region. And you can see that there are actually quite a number of studies being identified in Korea, Japan, China, Malaysia, Australia, and also 2 studies involving many centers across countries. So, in summary, I can tell you that in terms of the CML research, these projects will try to help us to address a few issues. Number one, improving disease control in various phases of CML. Another area is about new drugs, okay? Something about generic imatinib, and there are also in some countries, develop some new tyrosine kinase inhibitors, and they put them into clinical trial to get some data. And of course, as we have discussed, there are also some other ongoing STOP study, okay, STOP TKI study, to answer the question of treatment-free remission in the region. Another important thing that has been ongoing with there are a few patient registries. Now, patient registry you may not consider as a clinical trial, but to our side, to a doctor's side, is actually a very important tool to help us to understand the situation in the region. We want to understand what are the characteristics of our patients. In general, okay, our impression is that the CML patients in Asia Pacific region are younger than what we've seen in US and in Europe. Okay, now we understand if that is true, that is the case, and we also want to understand the outcome of our patients with treatment. There are already a number of patient registry in the Western world, but now we also see a number of these patient registry in the region who, with time, will get us very important data and information about our patients in this region. So you can see that I'm not going to go over each study in detail, okay? Because as you can see here, there are some studies being done in different countries, okay? In various different hospitals. Sometimes it's sponsored by individual hospital, sometimes it's by drug company, and sometimes it's actually from local sort of disease study group. Say, for example, currently the Australia Leukemia and Lymphoma group has a study. They try to do a study using nilotinib plus interferon as first-line treatment, trying to maximize the complete molecular response and major molecular response rate. I'm sure that we'll hear about this study's result later from Dr. Ross. And in Korea, there's also another phase 3 study. They try to study those patients who have a suboptimal molecular response to imatinib and whether they will do better with nilotinib versus imatinib. In China, the database has included a study which is actually trying to, as a sort of registry study, registration study for dasatinib. They're studying dasatinib in treating patients with CML and multi-center kind of registry study. There's also, although we are talking about a lot about chronic phase CML, we all remember that patients can also progress to deferred blast crisis or ulcerative phase. And in Korea, in the Aosan University Hospital, there's an ongoing study trying to evaluate nilotinib combined with chemotherapy, treating patients with blastic phase of CML, and also with the Philadelphia positive AML as well. I'm sure you may be excited about the generic imatinib, okay, which hopefully will give you a cost-effective choice. And you can see that, in fact, there are at least 2 studies now in Korea because they have their own brand of generic imatinib. They are studying and trying to compare if they call it Glinib, okay, this generic imatinib to compare with the sort of imatinib and see if they can actually give rise to good sort of efficacy and also safety results. Also, there are also some new tyrosine kinase inhibitors being developed. In Korea, we know that there's a drug called rodotinib. I think it's already marketed. You can actually use it in Korea, but not in other countries. So of course, there are some studies currently ongoing to try to evaluate, okay, this efficacy and safety of this new drug, say, compared with imatinib. And hopefully, this drug may be available in the future in other countries as well, because understand that the cost is maybe a little bit lower than the other brands, okay? And in China, there's also another new drug, flumatinib. Okay, this is another new tyrosine kinase inhibitors being developed, and they are doing a phase 3 randomized study to try to evaluate this Chinese kind of new version of tyrosine kinase inhibitor versus imatinib as the first-line treatment. Again, hopefully, with more and more new drug being developed, we can have more option in treating this patient, especially in those patients who may have side effects, may not tolerate the currently available treatment. So they may be responding well, but they still have the side effect. They cannot take this drug. Now, if we have more options, if this new drug can have different side effect profile, that may again benefit our patients with more choices. STOP trial, you can see that I've presented 4 studies already published. In fact, there are more studies ongoing. And in Korea and Malaysia, there are studies trying to evaluate, say in Korea, they're actually studying patients stopping treatment after achieving good response with imatinib. And Malaysia, they're also studying this sort of Malaysia, the MSID, the Malaysia Stop Tyrosine Kinase Inhibitor study, and in patients who have already responded for more than 2 years. Then they try to take this group of patients, randomize them to receive either interferon versus observation, and see if they can actually give rise to different sort of outcome. And again, this will probably, hopefully, give us some more information about stopping the study in the region. Now, in Japan, you can see there are 2 more studies. There are the Shimosa Hematology Study Group. They try to study the discontinuation of dasatinib, okay, and who have maintained complete molecular remission for more than 2 years. They call it dasatinib stop trial. And there's also another area they call the Kanto CML study group. Again, they more or less try to evaluate in a similar manner the outcomes of stopping dasatinib. Okay, so now we have some this kind of study. Now, there are, as far as I know, there are also some other study like this in the other sort of country. I know that Singapore General Hospital has one. They're trying to evaluate patients who have been achieving good complete molecular response for more than 2 years, stop the study. And there are certainly some other study in different hospitals in the region who are trying to answer the question. So in the next few years to come, we will have more and more data and guiding us what to do. And at least from my personal point of view, this at least will give me the information to tell my patient, okay, based on the data from the Asian people. We expected that if we stop the treatment at this point in time, your chance of having treatment-free remission is like this. Okay? So that's helped us a lot. All the clinical trial will give us the information to actually communicate with our patients. Okay? And so it will also be good that the patient advocacy group can also communicate with the patient, because we need to engage the patient. We need to make sure the patient understand what they are facing and what's the potential problem or outcome that they will have. So that's very important. There are also some other sort of study, and you can see that mainly, okay, for example, these are more or less some kind of a registry trial. We try to collect the real life, okay, patient data. So you can see that in the ASEAN Medical Center, they have an observational cohort. So they put it in a research manner, they collect all the patient's data. So later on, they know how well the patients are doing or what are the potential safety problems. And also, there are also another multiple center study, and is actually the, they try to evaluate the pattern of the mutation in Asian with imatinib-resistant CML, and also Philadelphia positive ALL. And I think they're trying to collect all the data, okay, from Asia country or Asian hospitals, that if they see a patient with imatinib resistant, if they have done the mutation study, then we collect the result and see if we can establish the pattern of resistance in the Asia-Pacific region. And then we can compare with other parts of the world and see if we are different. And so that, again, in the future, that can also help to guide us to treatment. Because one thing is important is that mutation study may not be available to all hospital or to every hematologist. So we sometimes, if we don't have the tool, but we have a patient to treat, what should we do? So we have to rely on what the information we have. Say, oh, in this part of the world, the pattern is like this. So in that case, we may have a high chance of getting a good response with this drug rather than the other. So that will give us some guidance. We have to, if we don't have the tool, then we have to make a guess. We want to make an educated guess. So that's what we want to do. So we hope that this kind of study can give us the guidance in our practice. And also in Korea, they are also having a SPRICE, the dasatinib post-marketing surveillance. So again, this will help us to get some information about the safety of the drug in real-life setting in Asia. Okay, because you know that in multi-center study, we know that maybe about 20% of the patient will got some water accumulated in the chest. Okay, but is it the same in Asian? We all believe that our genes may be different from that of the Caucasian. So how are the Asian? So we really need all those real-life data to help us. Maybe we have more, maybe we have less. Okay, but that will help us to know, and in the future, do the counseling to our patient when we start treatment. And also, there's an Asia CML study with Alliance, and including many, many countries. And there's an Asian CML Registry, which there's actually I know the St. Mary's Hospital in Seoul actually established an electronic database. They welcome all the center to join. And in general, we ask the patient to sign consent, and then we collect all the data. And so every country or every hospital can establish their own database using the system, and then we can collect the data, and then we can share. And when we want to have a research question we want to answer, then we can collect all those patients' data and analyze it and see if we have an answer to the questions. Okay, so that's basically a snapshot overview of the CML trials in the region. Another equally important part I was going to discuss is about your role in CML trials. Okay, this is very important. I think whatever in clinical trial, patient advocates have made and will continue to make a lot of contributions. Okay, and in fact, nowadays we recognize that a well-informed patient and patient advocates have a key role for us when we implement the clinical trial. Okay, how can that help? For example, there's the patient advocates group. Sometimes they can do some fundraising exercise. Now in Hong Kong, we have some of these sort of patient groups. Okay, where actually they run some of this fundraising and they accumulate a foundation. Okay, and then every year they invite us. Say if we want to have some research project, we can submit our proposal, get some funding, okay? So that we can establish some protocol or some research to study something about some research questions on our patient, and that will help us to understand more about our patients. The patient advocate group can also have a very sort of key role in lobbying the government, okay, or all those fund holder actually to allocate resources and support the clinical trial. It's also important that the patient group can actually educate the patients about the importance of clinical trial. Because when we see a single patient, we talk about clinical trial. You know that the patient has a disease, is not feeling well, okay, then he may not be that easy understand, okay, the clinical trial. But if we have, you know, a patient advocacy group who also, from another perspective, helping us to educate the patient, it will actually improve our rate of recruiting the patient successfully. And we now see that worldwide, there are also an increasing number of advocates actually serving in the advisory board and committees that comprise some of the infrastructure of the cancer research. In every institution, there is a review board, or what we call the ethics committee. They're trying to sort of going through all the clinical trial and make sure that it's actually ethical and it's actually good to the patient before they allow us to start doing the research. And in this sort of review board or the ethics committee, there are always some sort of lay members. They are not doctors, they are not healthcare professionals. They may be lawyer, they may be a businessman, okay, but we invited them to give us the opinion from a general public's point of view. Does that clinical trial protect the patient's right? That's a very important thing. So the involvement of patients advocates in planning or implementation of clinical trial is important because we need to make sure that the protocol actually addresses the need of the patient, not the need of the drug company or the need of the doctor. Okay? The academic, the professors, they always want to write papers, they want to get some research result being published. But the problem is from a patient's point of view, you all want to make sure that that clinical trial helps to address a question that ultimately will benefit the patient. This is the most important. And you know, the other things that will help is that, you know, nowadays if you are invited into a clinical trial, we'll give you a consent form, which is now 20 pages long. And the problem is that sometimes the language is so difficult that you can't understand. Okay? So the patient's advocacy can help us to read the sort of consent to see if it is appropriate in the sense of language and also the information is appropriate for the patient. Okay? And finally, nowadays we are doing a lot of this international trial. So we hope to understand the sort of the culture, the social need of individual countries, so that when we have a clinical trial, we don't sort of neglect one country or have bias towards the other country, okay? We need to take care of the social and religious or others kind of issues that a particular country will have. And we try to address them so that every country, every population, every group of people can have equal chance to sort of join the study. Oh, what's going on? Okay, so it's, no, I just, oh, okay, it's okay. So now you can see that for CML, you can actually go to the this website. This is CML Advocacy Network Trial Database, which they can constantly update the trials related to CML. And so we hope that in the future, like our Korean colleagues has shown, every country can have their own website or the means of sharing the information on clinical trial with your patients, okay? So basically, the patient's organization and advocates can have significant contribution to clinical research in different levels. Before the research starts, okay, we would certainly like to involve the patient advocate to design the study, okay, and to see that if actually we can identify a suitable patient group, and also to identify if there's any ethical or any risk dilemma, okay. When this research is done, probably you can also help us to manage the patient's expectation. Because some patients, when join the clinical trial, before they sign the consent form, they will be cured the next day. Obviously, this is not the case. We need to educate the patients. And the patient advocates group, you can also sort of get involved. And because from your perspective to explain to the patient, you can have, okay, sort of a complementary effect. And also, you can also help to promote the research and help the patient recruitment. And after the conclusion of the research, the patient advocate can also help us to disseminate the research result and also help to assess from patient's perspective, what's the meaning of that result? Does that help the patient or is actually not helping the patient? Whatever we think, okay, there are a big group of industry-sponsored research. There are some studies who are actually written by suggested or proposed by the doctor or by the university. And you know, all these are for the patients, okay? So obviously, from the industry point of view, they want to sort of confirm that the new drug works, the new indications work, the new regimen works, so that they can sell the drug. From an academic's point of view, we want to know how was the result, we want to get the paper published, okay? Because that's the way we get promoted, okay? Not me, because I'm doing a service, I'm not doing it in the university. But whatever we do, okay, make sure one thing. Patients should be the center of any CML clinical trial, okay? So sometimes your voice, your opinion is actually very important to make sure that what we do is actually focused on the patients, okay? So finally, some advice, okay? And if you really want to contribute to CML research, okay, number one, you need to understand that CML research is not everything can be done today. It's going to be a long process. You have to get a long view. Change just doesn't happen overnight. You have to make sure that you know about CML adequately, okay? So that's why this morning we have the 101. Hopefully we understand you know a lot about CML, and that's good, because that's how we can communicate, okay? And you also need to learn how the system works, okay? And see how you can actually make a difference, okay? And modify the system in the long run. As always, we established a very good and trustful relationship with the patient groups in Hong Kong and see how we can engage them in sort of helping our clinical trial. And remember that when we do this, we are collaborators, okay? We are partners, okay? We all come together, so we have to listen to each other's point of view. So you have to understand our challenge, our difficulty. So we'll try to understand your opinion. And remember that ultimately, it's about finding an answer for CML patients. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you. I thought that was a wonderful presentation. I think that at this point in Asia, and I will consider myself an advocate in Asia at this moment, okay? We don't have a forum in which we advocates are talking with the lead researchers in the region. Do you know of do you have any ideas of how can we form some kind of a working group, and would your colleagues be you think are ready to accept the advocacy community?
Well, I can't speak for every country in the region, but to me, I actually welcome the opinion from the patient's advocates. And so that's certainly a very important point in sort of helping us to implement or design clinical trials. And I think right now you're right that there's no platform for us to do that. But I would say that because from a physicians community, we have a lot of this sort of network to try to sort of do research. And Australia has got a very good network within the country. I've been joining a number of networks in sort of with different countries in different disease area to try to sort of design and implement various clinical research projects. But yes, we would like to collaborate or form a working group with the patients. I guess maybe the Max Foundation can start the groundwork. And we are yeah, I mean, with the good sort of experience, I think it would be good that we can involve all the sort of interested physicians, sit down together with the patients, we explain what we are doing. We want to understand how our work has been perceived from the patient's perspective. And that's very important.
Dr. Raymond, so I mean, extend from Pat's question. So in Asia Pacific, who holds, who is authorized, like, what is the professional bodies? Is it like Asia Pacific Hematology Societies, or is there, if it is there a chance that patient advocates could, you know, chip in or like contribute some things during one of your big scientific meetings? So this is part of to create awareness that patient advocates do play a role in patients management.
Thank you very much. I mean, certainly there are a number of these sort of organizations, society, associations in the region on various disease, or even hematology. We have a lot of various different society. And the problem is that a lot of this society, they are mainly sort of playing an educational role, you know, having seminars and other things. And they are not that active in sort of coordinating sort of research. But in one of the group I'm joining, and we are actually very active in sort of trying to collaborate regional trials. So I can certainly bring your idea back to the group and to see that in the future, if we have meetings, whether there are ways we can actually invite patients to actually come. But again, the problem is that then we have to identify in the region, is there a patient advocacy groups that we can actually approach and invite? Because now we see that in this meeting, I have met all of you from different countries. You're interested in CML, but maybe we have other research in other areas. Then what can we do? So that's something that we also want to know. So I think it's a good time that we start to build up our foundation and see the groundworks and see how we can collaborate in the future. We're not talking about we will have collaboration tomorrow, next month, or next year, but we're looking for it maybe 10 years later. All the regional studies in the region will have patient representative joining the steering committee, guiding us what to do. I mean, that's the ultimate goal that we want to achieve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity and very interesting presentation. Already got ideas popping in my mind now. But about the budget, in your experience, or maybe what you know, the other trials experience, how would you get the sponsor? Because the trial about stopping treatment isn't beneficial for pharmaceutical companies. So how do you get the sponsor? Thank you.
Okay, now in terms of research, there are a few sort of sources we can get the funding. Number one is from the government. Okay, every government will allocate some budget for the research. Okay, usually it's to the university. So through that, we can get some funding. The other way is that we can get it actually from other non-government organizations. For example, in Hong Kong, we have some patient groups. Okay, they establish some foundation. We have the Hong Kong Cancer Fund. We have the Children's Thalassemia Fund, Children Cancer Fund. Now, all these funds, they raise money. And obviously, they can not only provide support to the patient, they support us in doing research. The third part is actually from the first source is actually from the drug companies, okay? Because obviously, sometimes when you want to do some local research on a particular drug, they are happy to supply you with the drug, okay? And then we use our own time to conduct the sort of study. Okay, and there are also some other sources. You can ask for donation. You can ask for, you know, whatever kind of. Well, there are certainly some rich people in the region. If you can come with a good proposal, I mean, there's certainly some people who are willing to actually give you the money. Ultimately, you have to show them that you want to help the patients, and there's certainly a lot of people they would like to help. Thank you.
I have earlier mentioned this to Pat, because I saw that the reports so far are on biomedical clinical trials. So earlier you also mentioned that CML is chronic, and we have to make the patients understand that this is chronic. Okay, there are other chronic diseases are handled on maintenance doses, etc. Now, the chronic diseases nowadays are turning into healthy lifestyle, health promotion. So I was just wondering, and I mentioned this earlier, have we done any, maybe just a search of what related literature or researches have been done along this line, as far as CML is concerned? Because, and I assure you, there are a lot of organizations who are going to support this. Nutrition, for example, exercise, etc. So this is a very rich area of research that maybe the Max Foundation can explore.
Thank you very much for your suggestion. It's a wonderful idea. In fact, the problem is that these sort of questions or areas are actually not being addressed in many Asian countries. For example, about the knowledge of our patient regarding CML. Okay, so that can be done by doing a survey. Okay, we ask all the CML patients how much you know about the disease. We can also study about the quality of life. Okay, because the quality of life issue in the region has not been addressed. Okay, how about the side effect? Okay, or the perception to the treatment. Okay, or the subjective feeling of well-being. Okay, and how about, is there any impact on their work, on their life, okay, on their emotion? A lot of things have not been studied in the region. There's been some study in the US, in Europe, yes, there have been a lot of these using survey, they post then the questionnaire to the patient, ask them to fill up and send it back. But unfortunately, you're right that this is not being addressed. And one of the reasons is that for us, for the clinician side, we are so busy, okay? So when we do any study, we try to look at, okay, if this drug works, or what's the safety of the drug, okay? And it's a shame on us because we always almost forget the patients. So that's why in the future when we design the clinical trial, we need to have the patients on board so that we can also address the need of the patient, not only the need to addressing the need of the physician, because we want to know the effectiveness of the drug, we want to know the safety of the drug. But then the patient will tell us that I want to know what's going to happen to us after treatment.
Explore not only of the patients, but the support group.
Exactly.
Okay? A lot of the participants here support, caring for the caregivers. Okay? We in Cancer Warriors have a program like this.
Yes.
You know, like especially those who lost their children. Cancer Warriors in children. For those who lost their children, okay, maybe just, we have not done it very regularly, but we've had one. And some sort of just a post-mortem type of thing, you know, just a debriefing sort, let them talk about it, okay? And then we create a healing session for all of them, for all of us actually, you know. We also consider ourselves as caregivers, you know, and when you, you know, get in touch with them, you also have not only a responsibility, yep, you also have to take care of because if not, you know, you will grow tired and, well, hopeless also sometimes.
That's an excellent point because it brings me back about the sharing of our Indian advocates that maybe he wants to try stopping the treatment, but his wife doesn't. Okay, because wife is so worried about the recurrence. So we are not only sort of focusing on the patient, but also focusing on the carer and the families, okay, and other peoples, okay. So I actually have a suggestion. because this actually is not something really medical kind of a research kind of things. Maybe you can go back to your country's patients advocacy group and see if you can actually do a survey like this. And next year, maybe when we have this Rising Sun meeting, it's not me to do the presentation, but it's the individual country coming, saying that we have done the survey about our patients' well-being, about the family's perception about the disease, about the education, about the understanding of CML, of the patients and the families, and you show us the result. I think that would be more interesting to help us understand what's really happening in the region to the patient.
Dr. Wang, actually, most of the clinical trials are for the patient in chronic phase. But many patients who are in blood crisis phase or accelerated phase won't be in some kind of trial of new drugs. Then why is almost clinical trials for clinical phase patient?
Okay. It's a very good question. Okay. Number one, I think more than 70 to 80% of the CML patients that we see nowadays in our clinical practice when we diagnose them are actually in chronic phase. So recently, I've actually received an invitation from a drug company about sort of a study, a research protocol. They say that they want to have probably half of the patient with accelerated phase or blast crisis. Okay, they asked me if I can if we have some of these patients. Then I tell them that, you know, patients who are in blast phase, the survival is so short, and they're usually in quite bad shape. So if you put a protocol, a research project like this, it's quite likely that you won't be able to get enough patients in the accelerated phase or blast phase. So yes, you're right that this is a small group of patients which the need have not been adequately addressed. Okay, that's the point. But we do have, in real life settings, some difficulty in having a good clinical research because it's so difficult to find this patient. Okay, and even if you can find this patient, maybe their condition may not fit enough to join the clinical trial because they have a lot of other problems. They have bone marrow failure, they have anemia, they have very poor platelet, they have other organ problems. They may not be able to join the trial. So, but still, I think there's a very important areas that we need to look into that. Not only focusing on the chronic phase, but now there's a accelerated phase and blast phase. So as you have seen, at least in some of these clinical trials, they have been designed targeting at this group of patients. And we want to see more, okay? The more, the better. Thank you.
That reminded me of something I was thinking today with regards to the stopping trials, because when a physician has a trial, they have a certain number of patients they need to recruit. And I think that that is a very delicate conversation between the patient and the physician, because when the physician is telling you they have this trial, the patient feels a little bit obligated to join the trial or not say no to the physician. And I think that physicians need to be very careful to make sure patients are actually have the space to make a decision that maybe is to not join the trial. So there's a little bit conflict of interest in the stopping trials with the need to recruit and the need to allow the patient to make the decision they want.
Yes, that's a very good point. So, so because I'm doing a lot of clinical trials, so when I talk to the patient about a clinical trial, what I would like to do is that I first discuss in detail about the disease. I'll discuss with them all the available standard treatment option. And then finally, I go that there is another option. Because I'm working in academic hospital, we do have another option. It's about clinical trial. But I always, before I go into detail about the trial, I always clarify to them that this is only an option. Okay? You have no obligation to join this clinical trial. Even if you don't join it, you will receive exactly the same level of care as another patient who joined the clinical trial. So there's no need to worry about, you know, turning me down. Okay? You refuse my sort of invitation, doesn't mean that I won't see you the next day. I will still see you every single day as with other patients. I think that's the bottom line that we have to sort of emphasize to our patient, that they will receive exactly the same level of care. I won't say it's good, but at least the same level of care as any other patient who either join or don't join clinical trial. I think that's very important. Thank you.